white, then gray, then nothing at all. Helena's legs gave out somewhere between the equipment shed and the barracks. She didn't remember falling. One moment she was walking shoulders hunched against wind that screamed across the Wisconsin compound. The next she was face down in snow so deep it swallowed her arms to the elbows. She tried to push up. Her hands wouldn't respond. The cold had crawled inside her clothes through the thin wool coat she'd worn since 1942, straight down to skin that had stopped registering temperature 10 minutes ago. The snow pressed against her face, soft, almost gentle, like her mother's hand on her forehead when she was a child and pretending to be sick to skip school. She thought about staying there, just for a moment, just to rest. This is how I die, she thought. Not from bombs, not from bullets, from winter, in America, 6 weeks after I thought the war would end me in France. Then the world went dark, 6 weeks earlier, December 2nd, 1944, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The train doors groaned open and winter crashed through the gap like something unleashed. Helena Müller, 23 years old, former Luftwaffe auxiliary, stood in that doorway and understood for the first time what cold could really mean. Berlin had been cold. The basement shelters during air raids had been cold. The nights after the power failed and you huddled with strangers for warmth had been cold. This was different. This was cold that broke through every layer of clothing you owned. Cold that stole breath from your throat before you could swallow it. Cold that made your eyes water, instantly made your face ache, turned your fingers into useless claws inside gloves so worn you could see daylight through the fabric. Snow whipped through the open doorway, thick, blinding. The kind of whiteout Helena had only seen in newsreels about Arctic expeditions. Back home, Berlin's winters had been gray and wet and miserable, but there were limits. Buildings blocked wind, underground stations offered refuge. You could survive if you were clever. America. Helena learned in a single breath did not believe in limits. She stood there, one hand gripping the canvas bag that contained everything she owned. A comb with missing teeth, a torn photograph of her brother Dietrich in his Wehrmacht uniform smiling before he shipped east, an extra pair of socks with holes in both heels. That was it. 23 years of life reduced to objects that fit in a sack smaller than a loaf of bread. The wind tore at the gap between her scarf and collar. Sharp, merciless. It made her gasp. Around her, the other women shuffled forward. Their breath rose like smoke signals of surrender. No one spoke. Fear kept us quiet. Fear and exhaustion and the bone-deep certainty that whatever waited outside that train could not possibly be worse than what we'd left behind. But Helena had learned that certainty was often a lie. She looked up, bracing for what the officers in France had promised. They'd spoken about America with grim satisfaction, like the threat of it justified every cruelty the Reich had inflicted. They beat prisoners until bones break. They make women work in snow without food. They don't see Germans as people, only animals. Helena had believed them. Why wouldn't she? They wore the uniform. They carried authority. They spoke with the weight of truth. So when she saw the Americans waiting on the platform, her body tensed for the blow. It never came. They stood there in heavy coats and fur-lined gloves, breath fogging in air so cold it looked solid. Their rifles hung casually over shoulders. Not pointed, not ready, just there the way a farmer carries tools he doesn't expect to need. No shouting, no violence. They looked patient, almost bored. Then came the moment that split Helena's understanding of reality in half. A woman stepped forward, older, civilian. She wore a thick wool coat that had survived decades of Wisconsin winters and a red knitted scarf wrapped twice around her neck. No helmet. No insignia, just a grandmother with wind-burned cheeks and eyes that moved over the line of prisoners with something Helena couldn't immediately name. Not hatred, not disgust, concern. The woman's gaze landed on Helena, took in the inadequate coat patched twice at the elbows, the thin scarf doing nothing against the wind, the way Helena's entire body shook so violently her teeth knocked together. Without hesitation, without asking permission, the woman reached out and grabbed Helena's hand. Her touch was warm, impossibly warm. The shock of it traveled up Helena's arm like electricity. "Come on, honey," the woman said. Her voice was gentle, startlingly gentle. "You'll freeze standing like that." "Honey." The word struck Helena harder than any slap. She stood there, hand captured in this stranger's grip, trying to process what she'd just heard. An American, a civilian from the country Germany had been fighting for 3 years. The people they'd been told were racially inferior, morally corrupt, savage beyond measure. This woman had called her honey. Behind her, a guard pulled open a wooden crate. He began distributing thick gloves to the women nearest him. Not throwing them, handing them out, checking sizes, swapping pairs when something didn't fit. Another guard held out tin cups filled with something that steamed and smelled like chocolate, real chocolate. The scent alone made Helena's stomach clench with hunger so sharp it felt violent. A third man draped wool blankets over shoulders, heavy, rough things that nonetheless felt like salvation against skin that had forgotten warmth. No shouts, no blows, no humiliation, just help. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The prisoners stood frozen, too stunned to trust what they were seeing. This had to be a trick, some elaborate cruelty designed to give hope before ripping it away. Then one woman, braver than the rest, reached for a blanket. The guard nodded at her, just nodded. The way you'd nod to a neighbor borrowing sugar. Not to a prisoner, not to an enemy, to a person. Helena's knees nearly buckled, because nothing, absolutely nothing in her understanding of this war made room for a moment like that. The woman in the red scarf, Edith, something tugged Helena's hand again, guided her toward a truck where warmth radiated from a coal stove mounted in the bed. Helena let herself be led. What else could she do? As she climbed into the truck, she noticed one guard standing apart from the others. Young, maybe 24. He held something in his hand, kept it close to his chest. A photograph, it looked like, but he kept it face down, hidden. His eyes were distant, sad in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Helena filed the image away without knowing why it mattered. Someone handed her a tin cup. The steam rising from it carried sweetness. She lifted it slowly, afraid to taste, afraid it wouldn't be real. The liquid touched her lips, warm, rich. Chocolate mixed with milk and something spiced, cinnamon maybe. It was the best thing Helena had tasted in her entire life. She lowered the cup quickly before anyone could see her eyes filling. Not from cold this time, from something else, something dangerous that felt like hope beginning to crack through ice. Around her, women whispered in German. "Did you see they didn't hit us?" "That woman called me dear. The chocolate is real. What kind of trap is this?" Helena said nothing, just wrapped both hands around the cup and felt warmth seep into frozen fingers. The truck's engine coughed to life, began rolling forward. In the distance, smoke rose from chimneys. Buildings with heat, barracks where they'd sleep, where they'd wait to learn what came next. Helena looked back once at the train platform. The guards were still there, organizing the next group of arrivals. No violence, no cruelty, just men doing a job with tired efficiency. She turned away and stared at her hands wrapped around the cup. This made no sense, none of it. Every warning, every threat, every promise of what capture would mean, all of it was dissolving like sugar in hot water. And that terrified her more than any torture ever could. Because if Germany had lied about this, then what else? The truck rolled through snow-choked roads toward an unknowable future. Helena sipped chocolate and felt it burn all the way down, warming a place inside her chest that had been cold for longer than she could remember. 7 questions formed in her mind, unbidden but insistent. Would the Americans torture us as promised? Why was that grandmother smiling at me? What happens if everything I believed was wrong? Will I survive this winter? What became of my brother fighting in the East? Can I ever be more than the enemy? Is there anything left to go home to? She had no answers, only chocolate and warmth and the bewildering kindness of strangers who should have hated her. They didn't tell you how to survive the death of everything you believed. Helena had grown up in a Germany that was always at war with someone. First, the inflation that destroyed her father's savings and turned their middle-class life into a scramble for bread. Then the political chaos that made streets dangerous and neighbors suspicious. Then the promises. Make Germany great again, restore what was stolen, show the world true strength. She'd been 12 when the speeches started making sense. 14 when she joined the Bund Deutscher Mädel because everyone else was joining and you didn't want to be left out. 16 when she started believing the things they said about enemies and destiny and the natural order. By 20, belief wasn't even a choice anymore. It was the air you breathed, the foundation under every thought. Americans were weak, racially mixed, morally corrupt. Their country was collapsing under decadence. They would crumble when faced with true warriors. That's what every poster said, every radio broadcast, every teacher and officer and party official, the same message repeated until you couldn't remember what doubt felt like. Helena remembered the night she'd put on her Luftwaffe auxiliary uniform for the first time. Standing in front of a cracked mirror in their Berlin apartment, smoothing the fabric with hands that trembled slightly. Not from fear, from pride, from the certainty that she finally mattered. The symbol on her sleeve had made her part of something larger than herself. She'd believed it would keep her safe. Instead, it had led her here, to a truck bed in Wisconsin, drinking hot chocolate from an enemy who was supposed to hate her. The memory of her mother rose unbidden. October 1944, 2 months before Helena's capture. Their apartment had been cold power out again. The Russian front collapsing, though no one said it out loud. You just knew from the way news got vaguer, casualty lists grew longer. Bombing raids came more frequently. Helena had come home from her shift at the aircraft parts facility to find her mother standing in the kitchen. Just standing, swaying slightly, face gray, not pale, gray like all the color had been leached from her skin of mama. Her mother had turned, smiled. The kind of smile that breaks your heart because it's so obviously a lie. "I'm fine, Liebling. Just tired." She wasn't fine. She was starving. They were all starving. But her mother was dying from it. Helena had watched her unwrap her winter coat, the heavy one that was supposed to last another season. Watched her drape it over Helena's shoulders instead. "You need this more than I do. You're working. You need strength. Mama, no. You'll freeze. I'll be fine. I have the other one." The other coat was threadbare, held together with patches and prayers. But her mother had put it on without complaint. She'd given Helena the last piece of bread in the apartment, insisted she eat it, said it was important to keep strength up. 3 days later, Helena came home to find her mother collapsed on the kitchen floor. Blue fingers, shallow breathing. The doctor said pneumonia, but everyone knew what it really was. Starvation wearing a medical mask so you could pretend it was something else. Her mother died that night. Helena held her hand while the life drained out. The last thing her mother said was, "Be strong, Liebling. Be stronger than this place." Helena hadn't understood what she meant until now. The truck stopped at a gate. Barbed wire stretched in both directions, disappearing into snow. Guard towers rose at intervals, manned but not threatening. The whole camp had a temporary feel like it had been built quickly and would be dismantled just as fast. Processing took an hour. Names recorded, assigned to barracks. Given more blankets, shown where latrines were, told where meals would be served. No one hit them. No one screamed. The guards spoke English. Helena mostly couldn't understand, but their tone was clear enough. Firm, professional, not cruel. One guard, the young one with the hidden photograph, was assigned to their section. He moved down the line, checking that everyone had gloves that fit properly. When he reached Helena, he paused. Her scarf had come loose. Wind was already working down her collar. Without a word, the guard reached out and adjusted the knot, pulled it tighter, tucked the ends inside her coat. "Wind'll get you if you leave it loose," he said. Helena froze. His hands were gentle, careful, like she was something fragile that deserved care. No German soldier had ever adjusted her clothing unless it was for inspection. No man in uniform had ever touched her with anything approaching kindness. The guard stepped back, moved on to the next woman, as if what he'd just done was ordinary, natural. Helena stood there, scarf properly secured, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not painfully, more like ice breaking in spring, a shift, a thaw. Voice one, the propaganda voice drilled into her since childhood, immediately tried to explain it away. This is manipulation. They're making you weak. Don't trust them. But, voice two, quieter but growing, whispered, but his hands were kind, and the warmth is real. That night, lying on a thin mattress in a barracks heated by a coal stove that actually worked, Helena stared at the ceiling and tried to process what had happened. They'd expected torture. They'd received blankets. They'd expected cruelty. They'd received hot chocolate. They'd expected to be treated like animals. They'd been treated like people. Every assumption she'd carried across the Atlantic was wrong. And if those assumptions were wrong, what about the rest? The grand speeches, the promises of victory, the assurances that Germany was fighting for something noble. What if it was all lies? The thought was too big, too dangerous. Helena pushed it away. Around her, women cried quietly or prayed or whispered memories to each other. Someone sang a German lullaby. It made everyone cry harder. Helena lay still and listened to wind scrape against the barracks walls. Outside, America stretched vast and powerful and impossible to understand. Inside, wrapped in American blankets warmed by American coal, she closed her eyes and waited for whatever came next. Morning brought routine. Wake at 6 to knuckles rapping on the door. Roll call in the courtyard, breath fogging in air that hurt to inhale. Breakfast in the mess hall, oatmeal that tasted like paste but was hot and filling. Then came English lessons. A guard named Wilson, older than most at maybe 45, ran classes in a small building near the mess. Mismatched chairs, a chalkboard that tilted slightly left, oil lamps that buzzed when wind hit the building. Wilson wrote words in chalk that squeaked and made everyone wince. Snowdrift, he said, tapping the word. The women repeated it. Helena tried to wrap her mouth around the unfamiliar sounds. Snowdrift, Wilson nodded, moved on. Chimney, frostbite. He sketched crude drawings, fingers turning black. The women leaned forward, suddenly attentive. This wasn't just vocabulary, this was survival. You see this, you tell guard. No, wait, tell now. They practiced. I need help, frostbite. Over and over. Helena wrote the words in a small notebook someone had given her. German and English mixing on the same page. 2 languages, 2 worlds, trying to exist together. That afternoon came work assignments. A guard read names from a clipboard. Helena was third, assigned to the Whitmore property. Livestock and general labor. Report 0700. She had no idea what that meant, but she showed up on time. The drive took 20 minutes. South, then west, through fields buried under snow. The landscape looked empty until you noticed the details. Fence posts in neat lines, red barns with white trim, farmhouses with smoke rising from chimneys. The truck turned onto a long driveway. At the end stood a white clapboard house with green shutters. A wraparound porch. Behind it, a massive barn and outbuildings. A man waited near the barn. Tall, white hair under a wool cap. Work coat patched but clean. He leaned on a shovel watching. Helena climbed down. Her boots sank into snow past her ankles. The cold hit sharp and clean, different from city cold. This was open-air cold, sky cold, the kind that reminded you how small you were. The man approached. Up close, he was older than she'd thought, maybe 65. Weathered face, decades of hard work visible in his hands. But his eyes were kind. Morning, he said. Then in careful German, Guten Morgen, I am Silas. Helena, he nodded, gestured toward the barn. Work, come. The guard stayed with the truck. No constant supervision. Just Silas walking, expecting her to follow. She did. Inside the barn, warmth and the smell of hay and animals. Cattle in stalls turning large heads to watch. Their breath made clouds. First, Silas said, pointing to hay. Feed, he demonstrated. Pitchfork into hay. Lift, carry to trough. Dump, repeat. Helena took the pitchfork, wood smooth from years of use. She copied his movements. Her shoulders protested immediately, but she kept going. After feeding came mucking, less pleasant, scraping soiled straw, loading wheelbarrows, hauling to a compost heap that steamed in cold air. They worked mostly in silence, Silas occasionally offering a word. Good, careful, slow. Around mid-morning, a woman emerged from the house, older like Silas, round, kind face. She wore a heavy coat over an apron. She carried a tray, 2 tin cups steaming. Coffee, she said to Helena, then to Silas in rapid English. Silas took both cups, handed one to Helena. The woman stood there looking at Helena with an expression Helena couldn't read. Not hostile, not suspicious, something else. Then she turned toward the house, paused at the door. Helena saw her wipe her eyes quickly before going inside. My wife, Silas said. Vera. Helena nodded, sipped coffee, hot and bitter and real. She wanted to ask why Vera had been crying, but she didn't have the words. Work continued. By noon, Helena's arms shook, Silas noticed. Enough. Eat. A workroom attached to the barn, table chairs, kerosene heater making the space almost warm. Vera had left food, thick sandwiches, an apple, cookies smelling like cinnamon. More food than Helena had seen in one meal in months. Eat, Silas repeated. Helena ate, slowly at first, then faster as her body realized food was real. The bread was soft, cheese sharp, meat salty and rich. She finished everything, felt sick from sudden fullness. Silas watched with kind, tired eyes, wrapped the cookies in cloth, handed them to her. For later. After lunch, wood splitting. Silas showed her how. Position the log, lift the axe from the shoulders, not the arms, let weight fall. Helena tried, failed. The blade bounced off, jarring her wrists. Silas stepped closer, adjusted her grip gently. From shoulders, let weight fall. She tried again. Better. The log split through, not cleanly. Good. They spent an hour splitting wood. Helena's hands blistered even through gloves. But there was satisfaction in the work, something real and tangible. As light faded, Silas called it done. Walking back, Helena noticed a small sapling planted near the barn, barely more than a stick wrapped in burlap against cold. Fresh dirt showed recent planting. What is that? Silas looked at the tree. Something shifted in his expression. Grief, maybe, or memory. Oak, he said quietly, for remembering. Remembering what? But he didn't answer, just kept walking. Days blurred. Work at the farm, English lessons, meals. The voices in Helena's head grew louder. Voice 1. This is a trick. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget who they are. Voice 2. But they're kind. They feed us. What if everything you were told was wrong? The voices argued constantly. Helena tried to ignore both. But then came the day in December, 3 weeks into camp, when everything started shifting faster. Helena was crossing the yard between buildings. Wind screamed. Her scarf came loose, flapping. The young guard Caleb she'd learned his name was saw her struggling. Called out something she didn't understand. When she didn't respond, he jogged over. Hold still. His hands reached for her scarf. Helena flinched, but he wasn't grabbing roughly, just carefully retying the knot, tucking loose ends inside her collar. Wind'll get you if you leave it loose. His face was close. Helena could see freckles across his nose, gray-blue eyes. He looked tired, sad. He finished, stepped back. You okay, warm enough? Helena didn't understand all the words, but the tone was clear. Concern. Actual concern. She nodded. Caleb nodded back, returned to his post. Helena stood there and felt voice 2 grow suddenly stronger. No German soldier had ever cared if she was warm. No man in uniform had ever shown such simple kindness. That night she lay in her bunk thinking about Caleb's hands on her scarf, about Silas teaching her patiently, about Vera bringing coffee, about Edith calling her honey. Voice 1 tried to explain it away, following orders. Propaganda, making you compliant. Voice 2 asked simply, does it matter why? If the kindness is real. Helena didn't have an answer, but she knew the crack in her chest was widening, knew that every act of kindness was breaking down walls she'd spent her whole life building, and she was terrified of what would happen when those walls finally fell. The next morning at roll call, a guard approached with a canvas bag full of envelopes. Red Cross markings. He called names in accented German. When he reached Helena, he stopped. Müller, Helena Müller. Yes. He handed her a cream-colored envelope, thicker than normal, something inside, a photograph maybe. From Geneva, he said, then in broken German, do not open, wait Christmas Eve, yes. Helena took it with numb fingers, stared at the unfamiliar handwriting. Christmas Eve, the guard repeated. Made an opening gesture, shook his head firmly. Wait. Helena nodded. The guard moved on. Helena stood holding the envelope, feeling its weight. What was inside? News from home. Her brother, her family, she couldn't know. Not until Christmas Eve, still weeks away. Helena slipped it inside her coat next to Dietrich's photograph, felt it press against her ribs with every breath. That night, lying in her bunk, she touched the envelope through her shirt. Outside wind howled, inside warmth. 3 weeks until Christmas. 3 weeks to survive in a place where enemies gave you blankets and called you honey and made you question every truth you'd ever known. She pulled Edith's wool gloves from under her pillow. The old woman had pressed them into her hand on the platform. Keep these safe. Helena had kept them, hidden them. They were perfect, warm, made with care. They felt like hope in tangible form. If the cold killed her before Christmas, at least she'd die warm. At least she'd die knowing that somewhere in this vast country people looked at the enemy and saw someone worth saving. It didn't erase the lies, didn't bring back her mother, didn't answer why any of this had happened. But it was something. Helena held the gloves against her chest and closed her eyes. Outside, Wisconsin winter howled. Inside, wrapped in American blankets, warmed by American coal, fed by American food, Helena Müller waited for whatever came next. And for the first time since her mother died, she felt the smallest, most fragile thread of something that might eventually become hope. The days took on a rhythm that made survival possible. Wake at 6 when Knuckles rapped the barracks door. Roll call in the courtyard, breath fogging in air cold enough to freeze eyelashes. Breakfast in the mess hall, oatmeal that tasted like nothing but filled the hollow space inside. Then work. Helena learned that work kept you warm, kept your mind from the dangerous questions that came at night when darkness made everything worse. Questions like, what are we doing here? How long will this last? What happens when the war ends? She pushed them away, focused on routine instead. After breakfast came English lessons. Guard Wilson's classroom with the tilted chalkboard and buzzing oil lamps. He wrote words they needed to survive. Blanket, frostbite, help, please, thank you. The women repeated them, tongues struggling with unfamiliar shapes. Helena practiced until the words felt almost natural, building a bridge between who she'd been and who she might become. Not because she wanted to, because freezing in place meant dying. At the Whitmore farm, December deepened its grip. Helena fell into the pattern of barn work, feeding cattle, mucking stalls, splitting wood with Silas until her shoulders burned and her hands blistered even through gloves. But there was satisfaction in it, something real, tangible. Unlike the abstract promises of glory that had led her here, this work produced results you could see and touch. One morning, mid-December, after they'd finished feeding, Silas set down his pitchfork and watched Helena work for a long moment. "You're getting stronger," he said in his careful German. Helena paused, looked at her hands. They were rougher now, calloused, the hands of someone who worked instead of someone who waited. "Feels different than factory work," she admitted. "Better or worse?" Helena considered. In Berlin, she'd stood at a conveyor belt attaching rivets to aircraft parts. Same motion for 12 hours, mind numb, body aching. Making weapons that killed people she'd never meet. Here she fed animals, split wood for warmth, created instead of destroyed. different, she said finally. Just different. Silas nodded like he understood more than she'd said. Around them, the barn was warm with animal heat and the smell of hay. Outside, wind rattled the walls but couldn't penetrate. This felt like sanctuary, like the eye of a storm where you could breathe before the chaos returned. Vera appeared with coffee mid-morning. She always did. Helena noticed she always glanced at an empty chair in the kitchen when she came out, always had that same look of sadness before she forced a smile. "Thank you," Helena said in English. The words were getting easier. Vera's smile became real for a moment. "You're welcome, dear." After she left, Helena asked Silas, "Why does she look sad at the chair?" Silas was quiet for so long, Helena thought he wouldn't answer. "Then our son, David, he's overseas." The way he said it made Helena understand. Not just overseas, a prisoner, somewhere in Germany, somewhere behind the lines she'd once believed in. The weight of it settled in her chest. This family feeding her, teaching her, showing her kindness had a son captive in her homeland. And they still treated her like family. Voice 1 tried to make sense of it. Weakness, foolishness. No German family would do this. Voice 2 whispered, maybe that's why Germany is losing. The relationship building happened in small moments. Caleb checking Helena's scarf became routine. He'd see it loose, walk over without comment, adjust it with those careful hands. Never making her feel weak for needing help. Just helping. One afternoon in mid-December, Helena was struggling with the axe. The log refused to split. Her arms were tired, frustration built. Silas appeared beside her, didn't take the axe away, just adjusted her stance slightly. "Feel the weight," he said, "and don't fight it, use it." She swung. The log split cleanly. "There," Silas said. "You had it all along, just needed to trust the tool." Something about the way he said it made Helena think he wasn't just talking about axes. Another day, Vera brought lemonade to the barn, in December. Helena stared at it. "I know it's strange," Vera said in slow English. Helena could mostly follow. "But my mother always said lemonade in winter reminds you summer's coming. That cold doesn't last forever." She poured glasses for both Helena and Silas. The three of them stood in the barn drinking cold lemonade while snow fell outside. It was absurd, perfect, a moment of defiant joy against the winter. Helena tasted the sourness and thought, these people are teaching me that kindness doesn't have to make sense to be real. Voice 1 grew quieter with each passing day. Voice 2 grew stronger. December 24th arrived faster than expected. Christmas Eve. The camp transformed. Someone had hung wreaths on the barracks doors. A large pine tree appeared in the mess hall, decorated with paper chains and popcorn strings. Even a few wrapped packages underneath from local churches. But Helena only thought about the envelope, the one she'd been told to wait until tonight to open. Work was canceled. Christmas privilege. Instead, there would be a special meal, church services for those who wanted, a day of rest. But that morning, Silas appeared at the camp gate, spoke with the duty officer, pointed at Helena. The guard called her over. "Whitmore family's invited you for Christmas dinner. You want to go?" Helena couldn't process it at first. An invitation to an American home for Christmas. She nodded before her brain caught up. The truck ride felt surreal. Roads plowed, but narrow snow piled high on both sides. Sky impossibly blue. Sun bright, but giving no warmth. When they arrived at the farmhouse, Helena saw decorations for the first time. Wreaths on doors, candles in windows, smoke rising from the chimney carrying smells of cooking food. Vera met her at the door and smiled, a real smile. "Come in, dear, out of the cold." The house was warm, actually warm. Fire in the living room fireplace, stove heating the kitchen, smells overwhelming, roast meat, bread, something sweet and spiced. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, real pine, decorated with glass ornaments that caught light, paper chains, popcorn strings, gifts underneath. A girl maybe 16 sat on the floor working a wooden puzzle. She looked up, no fear, just curiosity. "You're Helena," she said. "Papa talks about you, says you're good with the axe now." "Rose," Vera called from the kitchen. "Help set the table." Rose scrambled up, grinned at Helena. "Don't worry. Mama's cooking is way better than camp food." Helena stood awkwardly in the doorway, not sure how to exist in this space that felt like it belonged to a different world. Silas gestured to the living room. "Sit, rest, dinner soon." Helena sat on the edge of a worn armchair. The house felt lived in, loved. Photographs on the mantel showed the family in better times. Silas and Vera younger, Rose as a child, and a young man in uniform. Vera caught Helena looking. "Our son," she said quietly. "David." She didn't say more, didn't need to. The empty chair at the kitchen table said everything. Before Helena could respond, Silas called everyone to eat. They gathered around the table. Rose bouncing with barely contained excitement. Vera moving with the careful grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Silas steady and calm. Helena sat where directed. The plate in front of her was china. Real china. Delicate. The silverware was actual silver, tarnished but cared for. Food appeared. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, carrots glazed with something sweet. Fresh bread, gravy, cranberry sauce. More food than Helena had seen in one place since before the war. Silas bowed his head. Vera and Rose followed. Helena kept her eyes open, watching. "Lord," Silas said, "thank you for this food. Thank you for this home. Thank you for these hands that help us. Thank you for keeping us warm and safe. And please," his voice caught, "please watch over our boy overseas. Keep him safe. Bring him home to us. In Jesus' name. Amen." Vera and Rose echoed. Helena's throat tightened. They were praying for their son, the son held prisoner in her country, while feeding her at their table. The meal began, plates passed, food served. Rose chattered about school friends, the Christmas program at church, normal family conversation, like Helena belonged. The food was incredible, rich and savory and abundant. Helena ate slowly, tried not to cry. After dinner, Rose disappeared upstairs, returned with a small wrapped package. "For you," she said. Helena stared. "I don't have—" "Just open it." Helena unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a scarf, hand-knitted, soft wool in deep blue, beautiful. "I made it," Rose said. "Took me 2 months. Mama helped with the hard parts." Helena held the scarf, felt the hours of work it represented. A 16-year-old girl had spent 2 months making a gift for an enemy prisoner. "Why?" Helena whispered. Vera reached across the table, touched Helena's hand. "Because you're welcome here, dear. That's all the reason we need." Voice 1 was silent. Voice 2 sang. Later, sitting by the fire, the radio played softly. Bing Crosby's White Christmas. Rose worked her puzzle. Silas read a newspaper. Vera knitted. Helena sat wrapped in her new scarf, holding the sealed Red Cross envelope. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a photograph. Her family, from 1942, before everything fell apart. Her mother smiling. Her father alive and healthy. Dietrich young and happy. And Helena herself before war had carved lines into her face. She stared at these people who were mostly gone. Mother dead from starvation, father dead from wounds, Dietrich somewhere on the Eastern Front, no word in months. This photograph was all that remained. Helena clutched it to her chest. Tears fell silently. Vera was there suddenly, arms around Helena's shoulders, not saying anything, just holding her. The radio shifted. A news bulletin cut through the music. "Heavy fighting in the Ardennes forest. American forces surrounded. Casualties mounting in what's being called the Battle of the Bulge. Temperatures below zero, soldiers freezing." The room went silent. Silas turned off the radio. Helena looked at this family, at Vera who brought coffee, at Silas who taught patience, at Rose who made a scarf, at the empty chair for David. They knew American boys were dying, maybe friends of David's, maybe from this town. And yet they still welcomed her, fed her, treated her like family. The impossibility of it shattered something in Helena's understanding of the world. Outside, snow began falling, soft, gentle, Inside, surrounded by enemy kindness, holding a photograph of a family that no longer existed, Helena finally understood what Caleb had meant. You're a person. That's reason enough. Not a German, not a prisoner, not a pawn. A person, deserving dignity simply by existing. Voice 1 disappeared entirely. Voice 2 became the only voice left. Germany had taught her that worth must be earned through loyalty and obedience and sacrifice. America was showing her that worth was given, freely, to everyone, even enemies. The days after Christmas felt different. News about the Battle of the Bulge trickled into camp. 19,000 American dead, boys freezing in Belgian forests. Hitler's last desperate gamble carved in frozen blood. Helena was in the mess hall when she overheard guards talking, their voices low, tight, trying to hold grief inside. That night, the temperature dropped to 15 below zero, the kind of cold that made barracks walls crack and groan. Around midnight, the door opened. Caleb stood there, snow-covered. His face was pale, eyes red. He carried an armload of blankets. He moved down the rows without speaking, placed an extra blanket on each bed. His movements were mechanical, like he was concentrating hard on not breaking. When he reached Helena's bunk, he stopped, looked at her. She could see it in his face, fresh grief, new loss. He draped the blanket across her. Helena sat up, whispered, "Who?" "Cousin," Caleb said, voice rough. "James, we grew up together. He stopped, swallowed. He froze to death in a foxhole outside Bastogne." Helena's chest tightened. Caleb leaned close, close enough only Helena could hear. "Our boys are freezing in Europe too," he whispered. "No one deserves to freeze." He moved on, finished distributing blankets, left. Helena lay back, pulled the extra blanket tight. Outside, wind howled. Inside, she felt something fundamental shift. Germany had taught her strength was domination. Power over others. This young guard grieving his cousin had just shown her different strength entirely. The strength to show mercy when mercy felt impossible. To choose kindness when cruelty would be justified. To remain human when the world gave every reason to become a monster. Helena pressed her face into the blanket and cried. Not for herself, for Caleb, for his brother Thomas, for his cousin James, for all the boys dying because old men decided their deaths meant something, and for the enemy who gave her warmth while his own people froze. January crawled forward. Work at the Whitmore farm continued. Helena's hands grew calloused, shoulders strengthened. She learned the satisfaction of physical labor that produced something real. One afternoon late in the month, she and Silas were clearing snow from around the barn. The sky hung low and gray. Silas worked steadily. Helena tried to match his pace, failed. Her breathing came harder. Silas noticed, leaned on his shovel, watched her. "They worked you hard over there?" he asked. Helena paused, nodded. "Different work. Factory, standing all day, not like this." Silas was quiet for a long time. Then he said the words that would reshape everything. "In America," he said slowly, carefully, "dignity isn't earned, it's given." Helena stopped shoveling, stared. "What? You're a person," Silas continued. Voice gentle but firm. "That's enough. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to earn respect. You just are. Because you exist." The words didn't make sense. Helena's entire life had been about earning approval, earning safety, earning the right to matter. Her mother had earned nothing, had given everything, had died without dignity. Dietrich had tried to earn glory, had vanished into the Eastern Front. Helena had worn the uniform, followed orders, believed lies, all to earn a place in a Reich that was crumbling. And now this farmer told her none of that mattered, that she deserved dignity simply by being alive. Helena thought about Berlin, about ration lines where weak people were pushed back, about the neighbor who disappeared for making a joke, about the boy beaten for asking questions. No one had called those people dignified. "I don't understand," Helena whispered. Silas smiled sadly. I know. Takes time to unlearn bad teaching. He went back to shoveling. Helena stood there, mind reeling. If dignity was given not earned, then every sacrifice she'd made had been unnecessary. Every compromise, every moment of blind obedience, all of it for nothing. The grief that hit wasn't for herself. It was for her mother, who had given away her coat, her food, her life, trying to earn enough worth to keep her daughter safe, who had died believing she hadn't earned the right to survive. Helena leaned on her shovel and wept. Silas didn't try to stop her, just kept working, giving her dignity in her grief. When she finally stopped, when her breathing steadied, Silas spoke again. Your mother, the one who gave you her coat, she understood. What? Dignity. She gave hers to you, not because you earned it, because she loved you, because you existed. That's how it works. Helena wiped her eyes, looked at this old man who barely knew her but understood everything. In Germany, she said, they told us we had to earn everything, prove ourselves, be useful, always earning. Never enough. I know, Silas said. That lie is what the war's really about, not territory. The lie that some people matter more than others. That dignity is earned instead of given. He picked up his shovel. You matter, Helena. Not because you work hard, not because you follow orders. You matter because you're a person. That's enough. It's always been enough. Helena felt her worldview collapse and rebuild itself. Everything she'd believed was backwards. This was what it meant to be human, to give dignity freely, to see worth in everyone, even enemies. Mid-January brought the worst storm of the season. The sky turned iron gray, wind picked up howling, snow began falling. Not gentle, angry, horizontal, blinding. By afternoon, visibility was nothing. Guards ordered everyone inside, but supplies needed moving. A sergeant came to the barracks, asked for volunteers, 2 women. Help move crates to the kitchen, 15 minutes. Helena volunteered. They bundled up, stepped outside into what felt like the world ending. Wind hit like a fist. Snow stung exposed skin. The world disappeared into white chaos. They made it to the storage shed, loaded crates. Began the return journey. Halfway back, the wind shifted, came from a different direction, stronger. Helena lost sight of the woman ahead of her. She called out, no response, just wind. She kept walking, or thought she was, hard to tell, every landmark erased. Her foot caught on something. She stumbled, tried to catch herself, fell forward into a drift so deep it swallowed her completely. She tried to push up. Her arms sank deeper. Snow pressed against her face, suffocating. She couldn't get leverage, couldn't find solid ground. Panic flared. She thrashed. That made it worse. Her lungs burned. Each breath brought more snow. Her fingers went numb. Not surface numb, deep numb. The kind that meant damage, time stretched or compressed. Helena stopped struggling, accepted what was happening. This is how I die, she thought. The very cold I came here fearing. She thought of her mother. Hoped dying from cold was easier than starving. Then hands grabbed her arms. Strong hands. Lifting. She came up gasping. Snow fell away. Air hit her face. Caleb held her upright, his face close, worried, scared. I've got you, he said. I've got you. He half carried, half dragged her toward a dark shape. The equipment shed, yanked the door open, pulled her inside. The sudden absence of wind was shocking. The shed wasn't warm, but it had shelter. A cast iron stove glowed orange in the corner. Caleb guided Helena to a crate near the stove, sat her down, began brushing snow from her coat hair face. Can you hear me, Helena? She nodded, couldn't speak, jaw locked from shivering. Caleb knelt in front of her, pulled off his own gloves, took her frozen hands in his bare ones. You're freezing. He positioned her closer to the stove, rubbed her hands between his. Feelings started returning. First tingling, then burning, like needles. Helena gasped. Tears leaked. I know, Caleb said. That's good. Means no frostbite yet. He checked her face, ears, making sure nothing had frozen solid. Helena watched him work, watched this enemy care for her with tenderness she hadn't felt since her mother died. The question escaped. Why? Caleb looked up. Why what? Why would an enemy save me? He stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. You're a person, he said simply. That's reason enough. The words hit harder than the cold. Helena turned away before he could see her face crumble. They sat in silence. The stove crackled. Outside, the blizzard raged. Caleb kept Helena's hands in his until color returned. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out the photograph he always carried, turned it over, showed her. A young man, maybe 19, face so similar to Caleb's they had to be related. Uniform, serious expression. My brother, Caleb said quietly. Thomas, killed at Normandy, June 6th. He was 19. Helena stared at the boy who would never get older. You lost him, she whispered. To us. Caleb nodded. And you still... Thomas wouldn't want me to let someone freeze, Caleb said. He looked at the photograph with grief that never really goes away. War or no war, that's who he was. He tucked the photograph back, stood, offered his hand. Storm's easing. We should get you to medical. Helena let him help her up. As they stepped into the dying blizzard, her mind reeled. This man had lost his brother to her country, had every justification for cruelty. Instead, he'd saved her life, because she was a person, and that was reason enough. Voice 1 was gone completely. Voice 2 was all that remained, and it whispered, what if mercy is the real strength? What if everything you believed about power was backwards? Helena followed Caleb through the snow, her world cracking open ready to be remade. February brought news that shattered what remained of Helena's old life. She was in the barracks mending a hole in her coat when the guard called her name. He held a cream-colored envelope, Red Cross markings. Her name in careful German script. Her hands shook taking it. She sat on her bunk, opened it slowly. The letter was from a neighbor in Berlin, a woman Helena barely knew. The handwriting was shaky, broken by stress and grief. Helena, I am sorry to write with bad news. I thought you should know. Your brother Dietrich is missing. The Wehrmacht says missing in action, Eastern Front presumed dead. No body, no grave, just missing. Your family home was destroyed January 12th in bombing raid. Nothing left. The whole street is gone. I am sorry. Berlin is ruins. Everyone is hungry. Everyone is dying. There is nothing left here for you. God keep you safe. The letter slipped from Helena's fingers. Dietrich, her baby brother, the one who'd smiled in the photograph she kept, the one who'd held her hand running through Berlin streets during raids, the one who'd promised to come home, missing, presumed dead, which meant his body was rotting in some Russian forest, frozen, lost, the home where she'd grown up, where her mother had cooked Sunday dinners, where her father had read newspapers, where she'd learned to believe in things that turned out to be lies. Gone, bombed into nothing. There was nothing left, no family, no home, no reason to go back. Helena sat very still, couldn't cry, couldn't move. Time stopped meaning anything. Then Caleb was there, kneeling beside her bunk. Helena, what happened? She couldn't speak, just pointed at the letter on the floor. Caleb picked it up, read slowly, his face went pale. Oh God, Helena, I'm so sorry. Still, she couldn't speak, because acknowledging it made it real. Caleb sat beside her, pulled her against his shoulder, let her finally break. The sobs came from somewhere deep, primal, every loss tearing out at once. Her mother, her father, Dietrich, her home, her country, her beliefs, everything, gone. Caleb held her while she cried, didn't say anything, didn't try to fix it, just sat there, solid and warm, anchoring her. When she finally stopped, when her throat was raw and eyes swollen, Caleb spoke softly. Your mother wrapped that coat around you so you could live, honor that, live. Helena pulled back, looked at him with scraped raw eyes. Live for what? There's nothing left. For yourself, Caleb said. For the future. For who you're becoming. I don't know who that is. Neither did I when Thomas died, but you figure it out, one day at a time. Helena wiped her face, looked at this man who'd lost his brother, his cousin, who had every reason to hate her but instead sat with her grief like it was his own. Why are you kind to me? Caleb smiled sadly. Because someone has to be. Because the world's dark enough. Because Thomas would have wanted me to be. Because it's right. He stood, squeezed her shoulder. You're not alone, Helena. You've got people here. The Whitmores, Edith, me. We're not blood, but we're family if you'll let us be. He left. Helena sat staring at the letter. She had nothing in Germany. But maybe she had something here. Not a country, not a homeland, but people. People who'd shown her more kindness in 4 months than Germany had shown in 23 years. The question was whether she was brave enough to reach for it. The weeks that followed were strange. Helena moved through days like walking underwater. Everything muted, distant. Work at the farm continued. Silas never mentioned the letter, just worked beside her steady presence that didn't demand anything. One afternoon in late February, they were splitting wood. Helena's rhythm was off, missing swings, frustration building. Silas paused, watched her. You're fighting the axe, he said. I know. Why? Helena stopped, looked at him. Because I don't know how to stop fighting. Fighting is all I know. Silas set down his axe, leaned on it. You know what I learned in my life, he said. The hardest thing isn't learning to fight, it's learning when to stop, when to let go, when to accept that some things are over so new things can begin. Helena felt tears threatening. I don't know how to let go. Nobody does. You just do it anyway, one day, then another, until one day you realize you're not holding on anymore. He picked up his axe, split a log cleanly. The wood doesn't care about your grief, he said. It just needs you to work with it, not against it. Same with life. Helena lifted her axe, felt its weight, let it fall naturally instead of forcing it. The log split cleanly. There, Silas said. You had it all along. March brought the first hints of spring. Temperatures rising slightly, snow beginning to melt in patches, mud everywhere, and rumors, Germany collapsing, Berlin surrounded, the end coming fast. Helena felt nothing hearing it, just hollow. Then May 7th. The announcement came over loudspeakers at breakfast. Germany had surrendered, unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. The mess hall erupted. Some women cried with relief. Others sat stunned. A few cheered, glad the dying would stop. Helena felt empty. Germany had surrendered. The 1,000-year Reich had lasted 12. Everything her parents sacrificed for, everything Dietrich died for, everything she'd believed in, all of it for nothing. Over the next week, repatriation procedures began. Officers moved through camp with clipboards and forms. Do you wish to return to Germany for reconstruction efforts? Helena sat across from a tired-looking officer. The form between them was simple. One question, one choice. She thought about Berlin, ruins and starvation. Years of digging through rubble for a country that had never cared if she lived or died. She thought about the Whitmores, about Silas teaching her dignity was given, about Vera's coffee, about Rose's scarf. She thought about Caleb saving her from the blizzard, about Edith calling her honey. She thought about her mother's last words. Be strong. Be stronger than this place. Helena picked up the pen, hand shaking. She checked the box, request to remain in United States. The officer looked up. You understand this requires sponsorship, an American family willing to vouch for you. I understand. Do you have a sponsor? I hope so. That afternoon, Helena borrowed a truck ride to the Whitmore farm, heart hammering the entire drive. What if they said no? What if their kindness had limits? What if she'd misread everything Silas was in the barn? Looked up when she entered, smiled. Helena, come to work. I need to ask you something. Something in her voice made him set down his tools. Helena pulled out the repatriation form, pointed to the box she'd checked. Silas read slowly. Eyebrows rose. You want to stay in America? If I can, if someone will sponsor. I have nowhere else. Berlin is gone. Family is gone. I thought maybe. She couldn't finish. Silas called toward the house. Vera, come here. Vera emerged, wiping her hands. Silas showed her the form. They spoke quietly in rapid English. Then Vera crossed to Helena, took both her hands. Of course we'll sponsor you. she said in careful German. "You're already family. This just makes it official." Helena's knees almost gave out. "But David, he was a prisoner because of Germany, because of people like me." Silas interrupted gently. "David returned 2 weeks ago, right after the surrender. Didn't we tell you?" Helena shook her head. "The Germans at his camp treated him well," Silas continued. "Shared food when they had little. Kept him warm. He said the guards were just boys, scared, hungry, doing what they could to survive." He paused. "He said if German soldiers could show mercy to him, the least we could do was show mercy to you. So yes, we'll sponsor you. Gladly." Helena broke down. Vera pulled her close, held her. "You have a home here," Vera whispered. "For as long as you want. Forever if that's what you need." "Why?" Helena managed through tears. Silas answered, voice gentle but firm. "Because dignity is given, remember, you don't have to earn this. You just have to accept it." The years that followed blurred together in the way years do when you're building a life. Summer 1945, Helena moved into the Whitmore's house. The guest room became hers. She worked the farm, learned English properly, slowly shed her accent. Fall 1946, Helena became an American citizen, stood in a courthouse with her hand on a Bible and swore allegiance to a country that had saved her life. She took the Whitmore's name as part of sponsorship. Helena Whitmore, the girl from Berlin, ceased to exist. Spring 1950, Helena met a teacher named John Ashford at a church social. Quiet man, kind eyes. He didn't care she'd been the enemy, only cared who she was now. They married in 1952. 2 children followed, a boy and a girl. American kids who grew up knowing their mother came from somewhere else but belonged here now. Helena never forgot, kept Edith's wool gloves in a drawer wrapped in tissue, kept the photograph of her German family framed on her dresser, kept Rose's scarf, reminders of who she'd been, what she'd lost, what she'd gained. In 1958, Silas passed peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, Helena stood beside Vera and Rose and thought about the man who'd taught her dignity was given. The lesson had saved her life more surely than any rescue. Vera followed 10 years later. Rose married, had children. The farm passed to David, who ran it until age forced him to sell to a young family who promised to care for the oak tree. The oak tree Silas had planted that winter. For remembering, he'd said, it had grown massive over decades, branches spreading wide, roots deep. Helena visited it sometimes, stood under its shade and remembered mercy shown by an enemy who became family. 1975. Helena sat at her typewriter on a winter evening. Children grown, John dozing in his chair, outside Wisconsin, snow falling the way it always had. She'd been writing for months. Her story, the journey from Berlin to Camp McCoy, the transformation, the choice. The final line came suddenly, clear and true. She typed, "America did not just save my life. America saved the part of me that was still human." She pulled the page out. Read it. Yes, that was the truth she'd been trying to capture. The memoir was published in 1976. Small press, modest sales. But letters started coming, from other former POWs who'd experienced the same transformation, from children of guards, from veterans who'd seen both sides. The letters kept coming for decades. 2005, Helena was 84, widow, grandmother, great-grandmother, body failing but mind sharp. When the invitation came to speak at the Camp McCoy Historical Museum, she almost said no. Too old, too tired, too many memories. But something made her say yes. The camp was gone, barracks torn down, wire removed, in its place a memorial park and museum, photographs on walls, artifacts in cases, stories preserved. Helena walked slowly through exhibits. Her cane tapped the floor. Around her, young people looked at black and white photos and tried to imagine war. She found herself in front of a display about POW treatment. Statistics about 370,000 Axis prisoners held in America. and there in a glass case was a pair of wool gloves. Helena's heart stopped. She knew those gloves, had worn them, kept them for 60 years, donated them when the museum opened. The placard read, "Wool gloves given to German POW Helena Mueller by American civilian Edith Brennan, December 1944, kept by Mrs. Mueller Ashford for her entire life, donated 2003. Helena stood staring, feeling 60 years pressed down. A young museum guide approached. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Helena looked at her. This child who'd never known war, never known hunger, never known what it meant to be an enemy, shown mercy. "I was here," Helena said quietly. "Winter of 1944. The guide's eyes widened. "You were a prisoner?" "I was." "Would you share your story? We have a tour group. They'd love to hear from someone who was actually here." Helena looked at the gloves one more time, nodded. "Yes, I'll share." The auditorium was small, maybe 40 people, old veterans in wheelchairs, their children and grandchildren, a few historians. Helena stood at the podium, gripped it to keep her hands from shaking. She told them about the train doors opening, about expecting torture and receiving blankets, about Edith calling her honey. She told them about the journey past factories and farms, about realizing Germany had never stood a chance. She told them about Silas teaching her to split wood, about Vera praying for her son while feeding the enemy, about Rose making a scarf. She told them about Caleb, about the blizzard, about his brother Thomas dead at Normandy and his cousin James frozen at Bastogne, about him bringing blankets while grieving. She told them about Silas's words, "In America, dignity isn't earned, it's given." She told them about the letter from Berlin, about choosing to stay, about becoming American by choice. Her voice shook but didn't break. "I almost died in a blizzard 6 weeks after I arrived," she said. "An enemy soldier saved me. I asked why. He said, 'You're a person, that's reason enough.'" She paused, looked out at the faces. "I didn't know that moment was my rebirth. I didn't know losing everything German would lead to finding something better. Something I understand now." She gripped the podium tighter. "A grandmother called me honey when my own country called me expendable. A guard who lost his brother to my country's army saved my life in snow. A farmer whose son was captive in Germany fed me at his table and taught me worth isn't earned. It's given." Silence. Absolute silence. They showed me that in the darkest war, ordinary people could choose extraordinary mercy. That strength wasn't domination. It was kindness. Helena pulled letters from her pocket, yellowed with age. "After my memoir was published, I received hundreds of letters." She read, "My grandfather said America fed him when his homeland could not." Another, "My father was a guard. He said those years changed him, made him understand the enemy was just people." Another, "Because of what America did for my father, he taught us never to hate. That lesson saved our family." Helena folded the letters. "I kept Edith's gloves for 60 years. They're in that case. Every time I looked at them, I remembered that first moment when an enemy showed me mercy I hadn't earned, when someone saw me as a person worth saving." Her voice dropped. "That was 81 years ago. That America, the one that could show mercy in the darkest war, that could treat enemies like humans, that could choose dignity over revenge." She looked directly at the audience. "I've spent my whole life wondering if it still exists." Tears slipped down her weathered cheeks. "I'm 84 years old. I've lived here longer than I lived in Germany, raised children here, buried a husband here. This is my home." She took a breath. "But I need to ask you something because I'm old and scared and don't know if I'll get another chance." Her voice broke. "Are we still that America? The one that gave dignity instead of requiring it be earned? The one that showed mercy when mercy was impossible? The one that saw enemies as people?" She paused. "Can we be that America again, please? Can we?" Silence stretched. Then slowly people stood. An old veteran first, then his daughter, then others, one by one, until the whole room was on its feet, not applauding, just standing, bearing witness, acknowledging the question. Helena looked out through tears and saw something that gave her hope. They heard her. They understood. Maybe that was enough. Maybe the question itself was the answer. As long as people kept asking it, kept reaching for it, maybe that America could still exist. Helena stepped down from the podium. The guide helped her to a chair. People came to shake her hand, to thank her, to cry with her. Outside, snow was falling, the same Wisconsin snow that had nearly killed her 81 years ago. Helena watched it fall through windows, thought about Edith and Silas and Vera and Caleb. All gone now, but their legacy remained, in her children, in everyone they'd touched. Dignity is given, not earned. That was the truth, the lesson, what America at its best had shown her. She prayed it wasn't forgotten. As people filed out, Helena remained, sat in the quiet, an old woman at the end of a long life, holding memories that mattered more than ever. The guide approached. "Mrs. Ashford, can I ask something?" "Of course." "Do you think we can be that America again?" Helena smiled, sad but hopeful. "I think you have to choose to be, every day, every interaction, every time you see someone different or foreign or scary. You have to choose to see a person, not an enemy, a person." She stood slowly, let the guide help with her coat. "That's what they did for me, when it would have been easier to hate, when it would have been justified to punish. They chose to see a person, and that choice saved my life." She walked to the exit, paused at the case with the gloves, touched the glass gently. "Thank you, Edith," she whispered, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Outside, the snow fell clean and white, covering the ground, making everything new. Helena Mueller Ashford, 84 years old, former enemy American citizen survivor, stood in it for a moment. Let flakes land on her face, felt the cold that had once tried to kill her and now just reminded her she was alive. She thought about her mother, about Dietrich, about everyone she'd lost. She thought about everyone who'd saved her, everyone who'd shown what mercy looked like when you chose it over revenge. And she thought about the question that mattered more now than ever. Are we still that America? She didn't know the answer, but she knew this: as long as people kept asking, as long as they kept trying, as long as they chose to see each other as human, there was hope. Helena turned her face to the falling snow and smiled. That was enough. That had to be enough. Because dignity, real dignity, wasn't earned through power or conquest. It was given freely to everyone, even enemies, especially enemies. That was the lesson. That was the truth. That was America at its best, and God willing, it always would be. The snow fell softly on Wisconsin fields, unchanged since 1944. On the ground where a camp once stood, on the memorial where stories were preserved, on an old woman who had crossed an ocean and found humanity in the last place she expected. Helena walked to her car, each step careful on the snow. Behind her in the museum, Edith's gloves rested in their case, a testament, a reminder that in the darkest war in history, ordinary people had chosen extraordinary mercy, and that choice had changed everything, not just for Helena, for everyone who heard the story and asked themselves the same question she'd asked that night. Are we still that America? The answer wasn't in the past. It was in every choice made today, every hand extended, every moment of seeing another person, truly seeing them and choosing dignity over division, mercy over revenge, humanity over hate. Helena drove home through falling snow, 84 years of life behind her, and one hope ahead: that the lesson she'd learned in a Wisconsin winter would outlive her, that the America that had saved her would remember how, that dignity given freely would always be the strongest force in the world. The snow kept falling, and somewhere in that white silence the answer waited, not guaranteed, but possible, always possible, as long as someone chose to see a person and said, "That's reason enough."